Welcome to Humanities 316, Middle Eastern Culture and Arts. I'm your professor, Nancy Erbe, and I'm very happy this week to be interviewing one of my colleagues here at Dominguez. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself, but I'm going to quickly say that since coming to Dominguez 21 years ago, I have had the opportunity to co-teach and work with several colleagues from Lebanon. And my colleague that you're going to meet in a second is from Lebanon. So I hope you will welcome her and find this fascinating today. Please tell the students a little bit about yourself.
Hello, students. My name is Rida Elias, and thank you, Nancy, for giving me the opportunity to do that. So my name is Rida Elias. I'm originally from Lebanon in the Middle East. I finished my undergraduate and master's degree in Lebanon, and then I started working as a management consultant and a part-time instructor at the American University of Beirut.
Yes.
And in 2008, my family and I left the country because of what's happening in the country. We left Lebanon and we went to Canada. So we stayed in London, Ontario, in Canada for 6 years. I did my PhD at that time in management, and I graduated from the Western University, from the Ivy Business School with a PhD in management with emphasis on strategy and organization behavior. At that time, the American University of Beirut got in touch with us, my husband and I, both of us, and we returned to Lebanon,
Right.
And became a full-time professor at the American University of Beirut. A few years later, things got bad. We left again. We came to the US in 2022. And I joined CSUDH in 2023. So this is my third year.
Okay.
And let's talk.
Yes, thank you. Before I ask you some basic questions, this is, as you know, just an introduction, broad sweep of the Middle Eastern cultures and arts. I don't want my students to know them. Now, some of my students are from Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, yes, let me see, Iran, certainly. I had one Saudi male years ago. That was fun. So I may have students, Egypt, who are from the Middle East right now, and they're excellent resources for the classroom. And some of my students may have traveled. I mentioned my niece had gone to Beirut to learn Arabic. Hopefully some of our students are doing international education as well. But many have never gone to the Middle East, and they see and know the Middle East through the news. And the last thing, when I was asked to teach the course, I said, I do not want my students to come into this course and leave with stereotypes, with misinformation, without the broader picture. And I wanted them, because my first Fulbright, as I've told you, was in Cyprus, working with both Greek and Turkish. And one of my next Fulbrights was Palestinian Christians asked me to come to the West Bank and help them create a master's in peace building, interfaith, multicultural, international. And then I have to, this is a very broad introduction, tell you that I had an Armenian colleague who grew up in Lebanon. And Garbus went on to do the most incredible peace building through Rotary International. And so part of my introduction, even though I've never been to Lebanon, was going to Glendale and enjoying Lebanese food. And since we're talking broadly about culture and art, they're both. Food is both, right? Cooking is an art, and it is a great way to experience the culture. And Garbus gave me the introduction to hospitality that my niece received. So I want my students to get to know the Middle East through the people, from the Middle East, right? My colleagues, my friends, because I think that's a better way. They are reading various authors and studying artists. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I want them to really get a taste for the Middle East through meeting with colleagues like you. So I'm going to start by asking you, how do you see the Middle East? This is a term that's tossed around all the time, but different scholars describe the Middle East in very different ways. How do you personally see the Middle East?
So I grew up hearing about the Middle East, right?
Of course, yes.
Middle East. We study history and we study geography when we are at school.
Yes.
And they tell us Lebanon is in the Middle East, right? So the Middle East means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yes.
And mostly it's the countries that are Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. These are the Middle Eastern countries. But for example, you spoke about Egypt, right?
Based on religion, language?
Not religion, not maybe language, but it is an area. It is in the Middle East of Asia. So geographically,
Right.
it's Middle East of Asia. You spoke, for example, about Egypt. Egypt is not part of the Middle East. Egypt is blended with the Middle East when you say Middle
yes.
East and North Africa. So now there are multiple combination of regions. Middle East and North Africa involves everybody who's on the Mediterranean in Asia.
You know, yes, we're not including Morocco and Algeria.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting, depending on who we talk to.
Yes.
They say different
Yeah.
things. For example, Egypt, very involved in the negotiations that are
Of course.
currently happening. Right.
Don't forget,
Yes.
Egypt crosses two continents.
Yes.
Part of Egypt is in North Africa. There is a small part of Egypt that is in Asia.
Yes.
Sharm el-Sheikh is in Asia. It's
Okay,
not
well,
in
we're not
North
getting
Africa.
into the Asia part
But
of
yeah,
this.
so for me, that's the Middle East or these countries. If I say the countries that speak Arabic, I'm not going to be very accurate because Morocco speaks Arabic and Morocco is not
Right.
Middle East. So Middle East is a geographic area, not about language. It's not about culture because they have different cultures in the Middle East.
Very different, yes.
Depending on which country you're at. And it's not about being Arab because there are other Arab countries that are not included in the Middle East.
Okay.
So
Well,
it's-
our students are going to be hearing different opinions
of
and
course.
definitions based on who I'm talking to and
Of
where they're
course.
from. How would you describe culture? What is culture?
Right.
We are in an age of cultural politics, cultural identity. But from your experience perspective, what is culture?
So for me, culture is in its simplest form stories passed to you by your family. That's how you...
Stories, yes.
It is
Yes.
stories passed to you by your family, by your community, by your surroundings, right? If I say the Middle Eastern culture, I will not be very faithful to the countries, right?
Yes.
So there are different cultures and differences in these countries that we call the Middle East.
And diversity within different countries. As a professor of peace building, I am normally working with the faiths or the cultures who are persecuted and minorities in the various. I don't even talk about the country, the geographic boundary, the nation state boundary as much as cultural identity, because there's majority often and minority. Now, Lebanon is unusual with that, but stories that are passed on by your family, your community, about who you are, about who they are, who your ancestors are. Would that be fair?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is. And it is basically, if we take Lebanon specifically, it's basically engraved in your religion and your sect.
Yes.
So not just Christianity and Islam, but within Christianity, which sect are you?
Yes.
Within Islam, which sect are you?
Well, and
right?
is it fair to say Lebanon is still the most religiously diverse country within the Middle East?
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Now, sect isn't normally a term we use. And I don't know actually anyone who uses the term sect with religion, but we definitely have denominations and different groups of people within the different religions. I mean, Buddhism is the same. It has many different groupings.
Yeah.
We're meaning something generally the same.
Yeah, yes. And I'm not sure about Buddhism, but I can tell you, for example, in Lebanon, when you say the president has to be Christian is not enough.
Okay.
It's not enough.
Well, let's get to that because, you know, Lebanon is absolutely fascinating as an interfaith democracy. There's nothing like it. And I am suspecting the United States, which primarily, despite our Constitution and our rule of law and our political systems, has primarily been a majority rules country. So that my students at Dominguez don't understand that the ideal in the United States is for everyone to have a voice in creating public policy and the law. It usually comes down like a sports match to winner takes all, right? And they're seeing that more and more. Lebanon approached democracy in a very different way. But let me ask you, you are also a parent.
Yes.
Yes, stories change as they're passed on to children, and children change the stories as they decide. Well, especially now, Lebanon is fascinating to me because it is one of many countries in the world right now where I understand more of its citizens live outside of Lebanon than within Lebanon, right? Yes.
Yep.
So there is this huge influence within the international community, but there's also a lot of other outside cultural influences for the children and the youth. Do you change the stories at all, or do your children have that kind of conversation with you?
Yeah, I wanna give you just an example of how this changes, right? So since I was born till 2008, I've always lived in Lebanon.
Yes.
And the stories I was told, they were focused on my religion, on my faith, on my sect coming down from my family.
Okay.
And even geographically, you know, Lebanon is a small country, but despite it being small, you know which village is which religion. Like,
oh, I'm sure.
Like Christians live here.
No, LA is very
Right?
similar. Californians know what block they're living on, and they will say
Exactly.
if you cross the street, you
Right.
may be in a different world, right?
But the difference, though, is that my whole life I've been raised in Lebanon in war.
Yes.
So I could not cross blocks.
Yes.
The difference in LA, you know, this block is, for example, of this ethnicity, but this block can go to the other block safely.
Well, no,
Right.
not necessarily. I, at Dominguez, well, we didn't expect we'd have this conversation, but I love it because I was reflecting on your time in Lebanon and war. Because, you know, I'm a professor of peace building, and I'm like,
Yes.
I wish I had thought to ask you more questions about your experience as a child of, you know, wars. But here is the thing in LA with students I've taught at Dominguez, you know, gang warfare live and well. And many of our students have been gang affiliated or lost loved ones to gang violence.
Of course.
So even though I'm not saying we can switch the two experiences at all, I do think our students understand sometimes quite intimately that you can't cross over, that this is your place to be, right, with your community.
The thing I wanted to tell you is that until I was 21 years old, that's the first time I went to Beirut, which that was the first time in my life.
Oh my goodness.
That, and okay, we're talking north and Beirut, which is about 30 kilometers away.
Right, right.
So less than 30
it's
miles
very
away.
small. Yes.
And that was my first interaction with a different culture.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Beirut for a minute because I wish I had visited my niece Anya when she was there, because Beirut, Lebanon has often been called the Paris of the Middle East.
Yeah.
And, who doesn't love the beauty of Paris and, the art and all of it? My niece is now living there, having left Beirut. She goes to Paris and works, right? But given the challenges that Lebanon has faced your lifetime, it's hard for me to even imagine a city that's the Paris of the Middle East in the midst of all this conflict. How did you experience that as a different culture when you went to Beirut? Tell us a little bit about that.
It wasn't easy at all.
Okay.
So I left the north. I went to Beirut to study. I went for my master's degree.
Yes.
In Beirut, and I had a dorm. I'm just giving you very practical examples.
Right. Well, our students will identify. Yes.
I couldn't live there. I couldn't.
Why couldn't you?
I didn't find myself in a place like, I'm used to all being Greek Orthodox where I live.
Okay.
That's not the case there.
Okay.
Right? I had family around me. It's not the case there.
Yes.
So what happened is I was panicking. My parents paid for my dorms at the American University of Beirut, but my uncle had to come and pick me up every day, so I go sleep at their house.
Well, the first time I stayed in a dorm, actually, I was at a Christian school for 2 years, and I had absolutely no problem staying in a dorm with other Christian girls, right? It was a very small community that supported us. But when I first went to a public university, a big university in the city, I felt so alienated and isolated from everything. It didn't make any sense to me. And you are describing what happens when you're used to having close family and community around you, right? Yeah. And I'm still not a proponent of dorms. I was referred to by a counselor, very nice man, an intentional housing community where we had a community where we did everything together. And I finally got my sea legs for a bigger university. Yeah. But yes, I'm identified with you.
But what helped me was that the first semester I was the only one there. The second semester I had people come from the university I was at as undergraduate.
Okay.
So that's when we have our dorm of 4 people, all of the same faith.
Yes.
Not all of the same faith though.
Okay.
Because we were 3 girls who were Christian Greek Orthodox and one who was a Muslim Sunni, but we knew each other.
Okay.
So that's when you start accepting the place you are in, because you're not alone. You have people around you. You're facing things together. So it becomes different. So no, dorms was a great experience for me the second semester.
Yes. Okay.
Not the first.
Well, and we could go into some of our history. I'm not going to do it because we have I've prepared questions that we're going to go through. But at some point, I hope you'll talk about your experience as a child growing up in a war-torn society, because that is much of the Middle East. And in my lifetime teaching peace building, unfortunately, the U.S. military-industrial complex has, spread lies in order to have an unjust war invasion. My students, most of them will not know the history because most are, of the age they're not going to know the history. But they have been shocked and appalled by what they're seeing in Gaza right now. And I think it is important in this course to give them a basic introduction to the forces that have led to that horrific violence, tragedy, as well as some of your ideas and thoughts on what they can do as Americans or however they identify to help build democracy, not only in the Middle East, but here. They're in a time when we are seeing some of what we're going to be discussing happening more here. So How do you identify as Greek Orthodox? Is that
I am
your
Greek
identity?
Orthodox.
You are. Okay.
Yeah, I am Greek Orthodox. How do I identify? I am Lebanese,
Yes. Okay.
right? So I
Yes.
am Lebanese Canadian. I identify as Lebanese, which is a big thing in the countries where I come from, because people say that Lebanese do not identify as Arabs.
Yes.
We identify ourselves as Phoenicians.
Okay. Okay.
So it is a conflict of identity, right? Who do you identify with? What do you
Yes.
identify as?
Yes.
And if you look, for example, the reason I'm saying that is if you look at our schools teach Arabic as a language. You don't take courses in Arabic. You take courses in French or English.
Oh,
no.
You don't?
Take Arabic as a language the same way you take other languages. But I studied math in French. I studied biology in French.
Well, French is one of the languages of
Right.
Is that part of why Beirut is considered the Paris of the Middle East? Because
and
the
culture,
French influence. Yes.
So, yeah, you cannot separate culture from history,
No,
right?
no.
So we were a French colony
Yes.
after we were controlled by the Turkish Ottoman.
Right. The Ottoman Empire. Yes.
So we were there, and then it became a French colony. But again, if you're going to look at it like this, so was Syria. Syria was also part of the French colony.
Yes.
And so the French put schools in Lebanon the same way they put schools in Syria.
You are prompting me to share a little bit of my experience in Cyprus, which is, half Greek and half Turkish now, and I will be introducing that to my students another time. That's a complicated political. But for students who have never lived in the Middle East, who have never visited, the sense for me of, and then of course West Bank and Israel, the sense of ancient civilization and the tragedy of Syria and its war. In my opinion, I was teaching Syrian students during that whole period, is how the artifacts of ancient civilization have, and the beauty has been destroyed.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's what I was going to get at.
Okay.
So both, if you take Lebanon and Syria, and they're so close to each other,
Yes.
like the biggest border Lebanon has is with Syria.
Yes.
So if you take both countries, and both were French colonies, both had French schools, both had the French culture infused in them.
Yes.
Right? But when we got our independence as countries, the two countries behaved differently. So Syria canceled all the French schools. Lebanon kept them.
Oh, interesting.
So in Syria, the language of education became Arabic again.
Yes.
In Lebanon, we kept the French as the language of education.
Well, and this is an introduction to something I wanted to run by you too that I have planned out. But the literacy rate in the United States has been declining steadily. This is part of our political emergency. That now I am going to include Egypt in this course, even if people disagree about the Middle East. I even thought about Northern Africa. A lot of people think of Morocco and Algeria, but I said, no, this is too broad of a course.
Yeah.
It's just an intro. But, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, literacy rate. Lebanon's literacy rate is higher than the United States.
Yes.
Most Middle Eastern countries. The only one that I found of the group that I'm including in this course, I think the U.S. is right around 80%. And Egypt is a little bit lower than that. I don't think most Americans look at the Middle East and see highly educated. So you're talking about the French schools and all. They don't think that way, but the truth is once you meet people and know them.
But let me just tell you, how old is US? How old is the United States of America?
It's an adolescent, yes.
Right?
Yes.
The American University of Beirut, which is a university in the heart of Lebanon.
Yes.
Established by an American expedition to Lebanon. Like people from US established the American University of Beirut as a Christian university originally.
Oh, as a Christian university.
Yes, it was a missionary university.
Oh my
in
goodness,
Lebanon.
I had no idea, because American University in Washington, D.C. here
They're not
is
related.
very progressive. Okay, they're not related.
They're not.
Okay.
Even the American University of Cairo is not related to the American University of Beirut.
Oh, I
They're
didn't
not.
know that.
They are two different.
They just call it American University.
Yes.
Okay.
But what I wanted to say is that American University of Beirut is older than Canada.
Oh my goodness.
So that's why you were saying about the literacy rates in Lebanon. We've had universities older than countries.
Yes, okay.
Right? So
yes. No, that makes the point I wanted my students to realize.
Right.
We are not trying to help the Middle East because the people of the Middle East cannot help themselves, right? We're going to be getting into U.S. interference for political interests, self-interest, but yes. No, that's the other part. I want my students to visit, to pick a Middle Eastern country. Now, my sister, who lives in Ireland, when she heard my niece wanted to go to the Middle East, like I had been in the Middle East, she said, I am terrified of her going.
I understand.
Yes, and I do understand it as well, but still, in order for the students to get a sense of how young this country is and how ancient some civilizations are around the world, it's really, you can't even express it in words. As an American, I just could feel it.
We have, you know how they list the most ancient cities in the world that are still existing?
Okay.
We have 3 in the top 10.
Wow.
We have Beirut, we have Sidon, and we have Byblos.
Okay.
That still are living cities that have been existing
yes.
for a very
since the beginning of civilization.
Long.
Yes.
Right? And Byblos per se, they say that's where the letter came out first by the Phoenicians to
yes.
send it to the world.
Wow.
Right? So it is a country, and if you think about it, like when you say Middle East, people think of countries that are rich with oil. Lebanon is not.
Well, see, that is the U.S. self-interest that has resulted in some of the interference.
Does not have oil.
Okay.
We don't have oil.
I've never even studied this myself.
No, but
I believe you. Yes.
What I'm saying is we had to find another way to keep ourselves sustainable, where education comes in.
Okay.
So we were the education center of the Middle East. So people from Saudi Arabia would come to AUB to study. From Egypt would come to AUB to study. From Jordan.
Okay.
A lot of people would come from Jordan to AUB to study.
I would think so.
So we became the educational hub of the area. That's why literacy is high. Okay. We are a population that did not have any other source of income like raw materials or
right.
So we needed to make things. That's why we had educational tourism, educational medical tourism, and we had tourism in general, and we had the banking sector, which failed a few years ago. But that's where the country became with high literacy, and people were educated because they didn't have any other choice.
Good to know. And see, now I have not been able to get any of my Syrian students to come and talk about Syria, and I have my own thoughts about why that is, given, what's happened with Syria. But my understanding with Syria from my students is that the reason a dictatorship was able to take over the way it did is so many of the Syrians were working class people who were not really prepared to, address what was happening, and the more educated had left the country and they weren't able to do what they needed to do. You don't need to respond to this, but we're going to talk about patriarchy throughout the world, but in different Middle Eastern countries, and democracy building. So I'll just put that out there. Okay. Well, we're only on one of the first questions, but how do you define and see the arts in the Middle East? And I know this is like an encyclopedia question, but it's an intro course for my students.
So before we started talking, you spoke about Gibran.
Yes.
Gibran Khalil Gibran.
He's one of my favorite authors of all time. He's such a romantic. He's such a visionary.
Yes.
Every 10th marriage in the United States quotes him.
Right, the prophet.
Yes,
He wrote
the
it.
prophet. Yes.
And then if you talk about culture and art in Lebanon, you talk about Fayrouz, who sang for Gibran Khalil Gibran.
Well,
right?
they're the singers, yes.
Right? And then you have Marcel Khalifa, you have then Rahabni, everybody. Like, it's a country that is full of art.
Yes.
Full
yes.
of all of this.
Yes.
But
inspiring art.
To tell you why is, and you started saying that Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East.
Yes.
You have to see the architecture, right? So the city, the downtown city is beautiful. It's built
I'm
with
sure.
a lot of art, with a lot of architectural design. And if you go to Baalbek, you have also the citadel that was Roman, Phoenician, everybody has
all
built
the empires.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it is a country that is built on cultures, that is built on art, that is built on beauty, if you want.
The beauty, the architectural design of the Middle East is the most stunning that I have seen in my life.
Yes.
That's just the truth, right?
Right.
And the beauty, it also deeply touches me. So, and you're actually describing, the different influences of cultures mixing. And I think some of that is what happens. I grew up with multiple cultures, right? And creativity starts to happen. And new beauty comes out of it. And thank you. Yeah, that is a wonderful introduction for my students. They are reading. I mean, The Prophet is one of the books they can read if they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, the poetry, certainly there's strong women voices throughout the Middle East right now, but the poetry of some of the men, the Rumis and yeah, Kabir was a Muslim poet. It's just like otherworldly. It's really
Nizar Qabbani. Nizar Qabbani is originally Syrian, but he lived in Lebanon. And like some of his songs about women are so deep and
really
romantic.
Deep. No, the love there, the love is very deep. Yes,
Right.
for any man who wants to understand how to love women right, it's just very, very. Oh, I'm not saying it's a,
I know,
it's a textbook.
because you have the two extremes there, right?
Yeah.
So-
No, well, that's a whole nother course, right? Okay. Your own relationship with the arts, obviously you love and appreciate the arts. Is there anything else you would want to say?
I am not a big artistic person. I don't have any artistic flair at all. But I like the beauty of houses that are old. I like the beauty of all of this. But I also like the modern part of it. But again, like, we have grown in a country that has always been built with art. So it's not like you see it. Let's take, for example,
it didn't arrive with one of the invasions,
and it's not modern,
right? No.
And it's not modern. It's not a city that was built yesterday. So it has always been accumulating on each other.
Yeah,
if you go to Beirut, you have the modern and the old.
There are a few cities in the world where you can appreciate that.
Yes.
It's like, wow, that people loved beauty from the very beginning.
Exactly.
Once they started building and designing.
Yeah.
Now, the relationship with the broader Middle East, I wrote that question for you, but I'm like, let me talk about some of this. Lebanon has accepted refugees from how many different wars, right?
Yes.
The creation of Israel, the Palestinian people at that time rejected the UN, division of property. They had been living on all of the land. I certainly understand the shock of what was going on. but a lot of Palestinian refugees are in Lebanon, the Iraq War,
Yes.
Syrian War. And so to ask for a broad relationship with the Middle East, it's very complex.
Yes.
But is there anything you would want to say just to add to?
So regarding the Palestinian refugees, I'm not very informed on that.
Okay.
And not even the Syrian refugees, because this happened when we were in Canada.
Okay.
And the Palestinian happened before we were born.
Yes.
But the Iraqi one is when I started working as a management consultant.
Okay.
And when I had the first interaction with the Iraqi refugees to Lebanon.
Yes.
That was when I started interviewing them.
Okay. Wow. I didn't even know you did that. Okay.
So I was interviewing them, and the stories they told us, the horrible, horrible experiences they've been through.
Yes.
I cried. I wasn't supposed to cry. I'm a management consultant. I'm trying to do my work, and then I cried.
But you're a human being. Yes.
Right. And then the guy who was telling me the story said, "Why are you crying? Why? We should cry on you." Because in Iraq, if it was not for the autocracy that they were under, he said, Iraq is a rich country. It floats on oil.
Yes.
So if one person works in Iraq, they can raise a family of 10. But you in Lebanon, you have nothing. You need a family of 10 to work to raise one person. So you should not be crying on us. We should be crying on you.
For you, yes.
And actually, this made me think, what's happening?
Yes, what is happening?
Like every country has its own sufferings, its own problems, and sometimes we get acclimated with the problems we have that we don't feel them anymore.
Well, and that is, you said the Palestinians arrived before you were born.
Yes.
And Lebanon was, embroiled in war attacks, with Israel because of that. And that for you as a child,
That's my normal life.
But it's, can you describe a little bit of it for the students? Because I have taught many students from around the world, Cambodia, Vietnam, who describe a little bit what it's like to be a child in the midst of that. If you've never had that experience, it's quite shocking.
Yeah, and I want to link this also, I don't know about Egypt, for example, but from the movies, I can feel that they have loyalty to their country.
Yes.
And you don't see this in Lebanon. You don't see a loyalty to a country. Because from my own experience, for example, I was living in a small place, which is the north, which is Kura in the north. And because of the war, I cannot go anywhere else.
Right.
And I'm protected by my family, not by my government. So my loyalty becomes to my family, not to my government, not to my country. And it's a place where you live and you have Syrian army controlling you. So whenever you want to go anywhere, it's like you're crossing borders to another country.
Yes.
And you have an army that is not yours. It's a foreign army controlling you where you are. But your family is trying to protect you.
Right.
To keep you safe. To keep you living, to give you the food. So in Lebanon, during the war, we never had an economic crisis. Money was available.
Yeah.
It is the ability to access food that was not available.
Okay.
Right? So you cannot go to the store because it's not safe, but you have the money. So that was...
No, the freedom of movement, you wouldn't imagine it, right?
Right. But people were next to each other. They were helping each other. So I remember, for example, when our small city was in war, our home was on the first floor and everybody else came to our home. So we were like 8 families in our home because it's the safest in the area.
Yes.
Everybody living in the same house.
Yes.
And it wasn't a question. It's not whether we should accept them to come.
You don't have a debate, a discussion. You need to be safe.
Right.
You do what you need to.
So-
Now, in peace building, it's normally the mothers, the women of the community who are doing everything to keep their children and loved ones safe. The men are often involved in some of the security, some of the intelligence, whatever you want to say. They see themselves as protectors. I'm not saying they don't, but the women are the ones that are actively involved in what do we do to survive and keep everyone safe. Well, your situation, maybe everyone just came together. Yes.
Yeah. But I want to say something because you keep
Okay.
saying peace building in Middle East. So there is a joke. And every time we find someone in Lebanon like deep in thought, we ask him, hey, what are you thinking about solving the Middle East problem?
Oh,
Like
no,
we
no,
grew
no.
up. No, I mean, we grew up in an environment where we know the Middle East is in turmoil and nobody can solve it.
Well, but see, that is a very important point where this is not a peace building course.
I know, but
It
I'm
is
just
an
saying.
introduction to the Middle East. The peace building that I'm involved with is community initiated and driven.
Yeah.
It's not outsiders, experts coming in to save or rescue people or tell them how to live. So I am involved in very quiet, invisible efforts to build relationships among people. Like, for example, right now, I will be interviewing an Israeli friend who has lived here and in Canada for most of her life. But there are so many Israelis, so many Palestinians, and so many Jews around the world that truly, sincerely have been devoting themselves to building peace. Now, they are in such a divided country, and extreme elements are always the most challenging, no matter what part of the world you're in, right?
Right.
It's a lot like gang warfare in LA, frankly, because the gangs will both terrorize a neighborhood while helping the mother and granny get across the street safely, right? It's just very intertwined. But so I'm not going to be introducing the peace building in this class, but students are welcome to take a course if they're curious. I give the people I teach a lot of credit. To give you one example, when the University of Oslo in Norway invited me to teach in their international summer school, Norway has the oil to have the money to bring students from all the war-torn societies. Israelis and Palestinians, young people came, but their parents couldn't know what they were doing. Because if someone had attempted to go tell their parents how to build peace, they would have been thrown out of the country. This is all very delicate how it happens. But yes, there are people who try to profit off of all of this and who believe they know better than the people of the communities themselves. I have never bought into that. Well, we have had quite a discussion about your relation with the broader Middle East. That most of the modern cultures in the Middle East are patriarchal. Now, we're going to be talking about Lebanon and its unusual political system in a bit, but even cultures of violence and war. And what I wanted, and I mentioned the Persian and the Ottoman empires, right? It was all about dominating. How do you see and explain it? Do you even try, given your experience in Lebanon, to explain why this has been happening? Now, some of my Middle Eastern colleagues will say it's U.S. interference that has taken advantage of or created a counter reaction among extremists who believe in top-down religious authority, whatever. How do you see that, the patriarchal structures and the cultures of war and violence in different parts of the Middle East?
So when you say patriarchal cultures, do you mean
Top-down authority.
top-down authorities?
Yes. Dictatorial,
Yeah. So Lebanon is not a royal system. We have a president who's elected.
Yes. No, you
So
are
we are
in
one-
contrast
yeah.
to this. Yes.
So we are one of the very rare democracies.
You are one of the rare. In fact, Freedom House named you and Israel as the only democracies with freedoms in the Middle East.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't want to talk about Syria, but I know even though they had their own president elected by the people, it wasn't a democracy. It was something else. So people were forced somehow to choose their own president, to choose a certain president. In Lebanon, it's different. But
well, maybe we can go and talk about Lebanon.
yeah. So would we call it a democracy election? The president is elected, but the way the parliament, the house, the parliament is made, it's quota, right?
Yes.
So we go back to religion
Yes.
in this case, because the parliament has to reflect the same percentage of religion in the parliament. So if we say 45% are Christians in Lebanon, 45% of the parliament has to be Christian.
Okay, all Orthodox Christianity?
No.
Okay.
And that's where, when you said we don't talk about sects outside, we have to talk about sects in Lebanon.
Okay.
Because that's why I said you cannot say Christians in Lebanon. You have to say which sect in Christianity.
Okay.
In religions and sects, we have 17.
Wow.
So 17.
How do you say the...
Maronite.
Yeah, Maronite. I met
Maronite. The president has to be Maronite.
Okay.
The prime minister has to be Muslim Sunni.
Yeah. Okay.
The president of the parliament has to be Muslim Shia.
Okay.
So it's not just the big religions, it's the sub-selections. You were talking about your Armenian friend who introduced you.
Yes.
We even have Armenian Orthodox in the parliament.
Yeah,
so it is a sect that we have.
I got to meet more Orthodox in the Middle East than I ever had in my life. It's just most of American Christians, unless they are Greek Orthodox, there are some, absolutely, Armenian Orthodox, but most Christians in the U.S. don't think in these terms. But it's critical here. Now, why was it set up? I think this is important for students to hear. Why was it set up that every group had representation of some kind?
Minorities still have a voice.
Everyone needs to have a voice.
Right?
Yes.
So this is good in this perspective. Everybody will have a voice.
Yes.
The negative of it, though, imagine you need everybody to be in agreement
the European
to elect a president.
Is a good example.
So
it's impossible when you really have
voids.
Such differences.
And that's what led to several voids in the presidents of Lebanon. We didn't have a president multiple times for years because the parliament could not agree on who to elect as a president.
Wow.
The president has to be Christian Maronite, cannot be anything else.
Yes, and most of my students don't even know that sect, right? I met them for the first time in Cyprus. Yes, wow. Well, we're seeing some of the struggle just with our own country's polarization. I don't think most of my students' communities feel they have an adequate voice, a fair voice at the table, despite all the talk of human rights, constitutional rights. It's all money has sort of taken over elections, right?
Yeah, everywhere.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is difficult to do democracy. It truly is.
It is.
But if the alternative is dictatorship and repression of human rights, repression of people, war and violence, eternal war and violence is worth the effort. But I do think it's still a working in progress experiment in all countries. I don't know of any model that I would point to as this is the one we want to learn from, right? I think Lebanon has actually created a model that does require minority voice at the table. Despite all of our talk of this in this country, you don't see it with the laws and the public policy and the accountability of government applying the law and policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of patriarchal structure,
male dominance is another way.
Yeah, now we don't have as many females in the political system.
Well, we're going to be talking about women in the Middle East as well. Yes. I mean, that's true everywhere. We have never elected a woman president, and we may never. The European countries are asking me, what is the problem with the U.S.? But that's the reality.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me see what else I sent you to make. Let's see. Oh, U.S. interests and interference. And now you're living here now. And, you know, I don't think you're going to get in trouble with my asking this question because we're just sharing, you know, our perspective, right?
Yes.
Obviously, the U.S. has interfered at times, right? Yeah. Its unconditional support for Israel. And my students, not in this, well, actually in this class too, they have the option of reading books on the Holocaust to see the Jewish tragedy, right, that led to the Zionists creating the state of Israel. But this is the course where they start to see how difficult all of that has been for people to actually live, right?
Yeah.
And the U.S. saying you can do whatever you want to other people, we will support you, has interfered in what has happened. And now I see it. I see the U.S. having more economic interests in partnering to create more tourism and whatever, hospitality industry, and profit even more. And I have had my own business, so I'm not anti-capitalism at all. But whenever the U.S. puts its economic interests above the welfare of a people, of a region, a country, I see a lot of people suffer. And so how do you see the U.S. influence with the Middle East? I've seen a lot of hatred when I've been there of the U.S.
And I see it too, but I also see the good in it.
Okay,
right?
good.
So there is the good and
of course,
the bad.
Of course, yes.
And I cannot speak about the intentions of the U.S., and I cannot speak about the intentions of the Lebanese government, but I can speak as a citizen.
Yes.
Right?
We're talking person to person here.
And I started by telling you that the history of the American University was an American mission to Lebanon.
Was a missionary. I had no idea. They were trying to
that's the good.
Be evangelicals. Yes.
And that's good. They tried to educate the people. They actually built a strong education.
It's wonderful to hear you say that. I have worked with many indigenous from this country that would not say what the evangelicals, what the Catholic missionaries were doing in this country was good. They tried to destroy some of the culture, maybe in ignorance, right?
But it changed, right? So now the university is not a Christian university. No. Changed
it's a major
time,
respected,
adapted, all of this.
Yes.
But I'm talking about the strength of education that this institution brought because of an American person going there to establish an education.
And believing in educating people. No, that is good.
And if I want to add to it, like there is now the Middle East initiative, program initiative, which is called MEPI, for teaching leadership. So the U.S. has a fund called MEPI Teaching Leadership, TL, for the undergraduate and the graduate, where they fund students from different places to take this program at American University of Beirut, and they pay their tuition.
Oh, nice. And this is throughout the Middle East. They're bringing students from...
Yes.
And you and I have discussed enough our perspective on leadership to know this is foundational for democracy building when they return to their...
Right.
Yes.
So this is part of the good. Now, part of the bad is what you're saying is, how much are we westernizing the East?
Interesting question.
Like putting the whole culture, the American culture, taking over the indigenous culture in the country.
Well, you know, the West... Yeah, I suppose it now is seen as American. It was often seen as the European, the colonizers, right? Yeah. But it's all sort of, I'm interested in your thoughts on this.
So this is part of it. where people are fearing, even like if you take my children, for example, my
Yes.
parents believe my children are more Western
Yes.
than they are Lebanese.
Yes.
So people there, they
Yes.
feel they're losing their culture.
Yes.
And to what?
Yes.
They don't understand it, right? They don't understand. They want people to stay rooted in their culture, to stay rooted in their beliefs, in their value system, which is different. It's not right or wrong,
No,
but different.
it's different. It's my experience when I first visited Norway. I look enough like my Norwegian grandmother that the Norwegians assumed I was Norwegian when they would see me. And some were very, very friendly, talking about immigration to the U.S. But others, and I have heard the same from Japanese who families have immigrated here, they would be disgusted when they learned I was not speaking Norwegian because they knew I was American, right?
Yeah.
And it was like a betrayal. I'm sure our students whose families have immigrated know some of what this feels like, because you do change when you travel and live somewhere else, and the people you lived with know it. They can feel it when you come back, and hopefully those who love you are not going to judge you, right? But it's somewhat of a betrayal, a disappointment that you are changing in these ways, right?
And you are connecting the culture and language, right?
Yes.
So you're connecting these two. For example, like now at home, when my kids start speaking English, we ask them to shift to Arabic.
Okay.
Like we try.
You go back and forth.
We try to tell them to keep this language.
You want them to keep their languages.
Right. And it's not just because it is a culture. The more languages you know, the more cultures you're open to.
But it is also because it's a culture. My brother-in-law, he wants his children to know Irish as well.
Right.
Everyone who speaks multiple language understands. It's not just
the language,
no,
it's the connection to the roots,
right?
The connection to another culture. It's the connection to everything. Let me go back, for example, to the American influence in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And how the Middle East people feel about it. Like growing up in Lebanon, the first time I wanted to get a visit visa to US, I had to go to Damascus. Can you imagine that? To Syria.
Okay.
We didn't have an embassy in Lebanon.
Okay.
And now suddenly...
That's a great answer. Yeah.
Right? And suddenly now, Syrians who want a visa, they have to come to Lebanon because they don't have an
right.
See, that's
Divine
where
justice,
people do not trust what's the American interest in the country.
Oh, yeah.
How did you shift from here to there and from there to here?
And what are you doing? And do you even know what you're doing?
Exactly.
Now I'm curious, as we're discussing this Arab Spring.
Yeah.
That was a big deal, you know.
Yes.
Our colleague Hamoud Salih was a journalist before he became a professor of political science. And he was certainly being asked about the Arab Spring. I was teaching students who were Egyptian at the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, social media, computer engineering, it all brought people together. But in terms of what the aspirations of the young people, the communities with Arab Spring were, you know, I wondered myself, were they hoping that if they were in a repressive, you know, dictatorship, that the U.S. would come in like it had in Iraq, you know, get rid of the dictator? Or were they just hoping for a new day where they were self-determining? Egypt was not ready for a democracy. The Muslim Brotherhood was the only organized group that was prepared to elect leadership. And I've had students go back to Egypt because they believe the education has to include basic leadership skills.
Yeah.
So people know how to build a democracy, right?
Exactly.
But Arab Spring, how did you see that? Did it have anything to do with the U.S. interference? Because I have felt the hatred of U.S. interference in different places, but Arab Spring was really saying we want a different way of living.
Yes, but you have to connect this to the internet, right? To the internet.
It was all social media. Yes.
Right? Why this happened is because people with social media could see how the others are living.
Yes. And they want to live more free.
Exactly like the others.
Yes.
But think about it like you have a family where you have children and the parents are the only two people who make all the decisions.
Right.
And then the kids are so upset that their parents are making all the
that's
decisions.
patriarchy, but for adults, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'm saying even the kids are growing up, they're becoming adults, they're becoming in their 20s. Still, the parents are making all the decisions.
Well, you know, Iran is an example where I've met many women over the years, and I'm going to have an Iranian woman talking in this class as well. And she's afraid to return to the country right now, given what's going on with women. But Iran was a much more like Turkey and Lebanon, a more modern culture.
Of course.
With many privileges and freedoms until U.S. interference, and then Islamic authorities, religious authorities decided to take control. And total repression. But those people, it's not just getting upset that other people have had those freedoms. Some of the living people know what it was like to live in a more free, full way before. Yes.
But for generations, they lost how to do that.
Yes.
So when you were talking about educating from the grassroots how to live with democracy, that's what they need. It's not they need a system of dictatorship removed and then put a system of democracy. How are they going to learn how to make decisions if they don't know how to make it?
It's what I teach. It's what you teach. We both agree on this.
Right.
And fortunately, there are people in those countries who are doing what they can.
Yeah.
Now, Iran is an unusual discussion.
Yeah.
Well, Turkey is an interesting discussion.
Yes.
I'm trying to get one of my Turkish colleagues to talk, but there are certain countries in the Middle East where it's hard to get people to talk about what's going on for some reasons.
And even when I talk, I don't understand it all, right?
No.
Like sometimes I have no clue what's happening or
No, but you know, it's really important that my students talk to people from the communities about their experience rather than going to a library and just reading a book or going on the net and seeing what's going on. A lot of propaganda, a lot of misinformation. Do you see other promising democracies emerging in the Middle East? I do think Lebanon, I know Lebanon struggles, but I still see it as a promising democracy. Turkey it's fascinating to me because the forces within are so equivalent to each other, right?
Yeah.
It says
I'm watching Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay.
Very
the women, it's amazing, the women. And that's what I wanted to ask about, where women are emerging as more free, having a voice. Saudi Arabia is one of those places.
You're saying this, but if you go back to history, Tunisia was one of the first countries in the world.
They've received the Nobel Peace Prize for their role in the Arab Spring, right?
Not only that, women in Tunis and Tunisia were the first women in the world to vote.
Oh my God, I had no idea.
Before a lot of other countries.
Wow. See, that is, those are some of the countries I chose not to bring into this course.
But what I'm saying is it's not the case now.
Yes.
But these were countries where women's rights were established even before US, even before a lot of European
but now
countries.
have been taken away.
But now it's regressing. But like as up at the forefront, the Middle East and the area were really up on the education, on the freedom.
No, they were pioneering with women's rights and women's empowerment.
Right.
Yes. Wow. You know, what's happening right now, social media, I have Iranian friends who will say to me, the young women in Iran are fearless. It does not matter what's going to happen to them. They are determined that they are going to somehow break through the barriers. And it's just horrible. You know, it's like any of the other horrors that you see with war and violence.
But I admire them. Like
Oh.
they're really,
They are inspirational.
They
no. For women around the world, because there are a lot of, we focused as a U.S. focused so much on Afghanistan, and I have been working with women forever of my adult career around the world. And Afghanistan is an important community, but so are the other communities of the world. This is a global issue with women. It is one that permeates our culture as well as all others. There is no place where women are safe and fully free, empowered. There is no place. I keep looking and trying to create. Iceland wants to be the pioneer, and I'm like, well, good luck, Iceland. I'll help you if you can be that, because it's so critically needed to keep moving forward, small steps. Okay, what can we as Americans do to support emerging democracies, women in the Middle East? Do you just have any thoughts? My students, they're always looking for ways they might be part of the solution, right? Globally.
yeah. And again, I think these big gestures, they don't work. What
No.
you said, the grassroots, the small pots of
Right.
working
Person
with
to
people,
person.
yeah, and working for people to organize, to be self-independent, to be self-made, to understand how they can make a difference, makes a better way to help the
Well,
people
and
there.
that is the value of international education, because you
Yes.
get to visit the countries, the people, and figure out for yourself what you want to do, how you can help. I have been a part, Fulbright's been very generous to me for 15 years or so. And I have been Egypt has a Fulbright Commission where it's mostly women now. It was all, boys and girls for years were applying for Fulbrights to come to the U.S. to further their education. And the last time I did the review, it was all girls, really inspirational girls. And, we can do that within our own country, trying to preserve the traditions of international understanding, right? Because it's under attack right now. So those are things we can do that could make a big difference.
Yeah, and I sent you the case I wrote about Fadia Kiwan.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
So this is also a person who's highly educated from Lebanon, who's trying to help the women of the Middle East.
Yes.
They're based in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken. The organization is based in Egypt, but they're trying to help the women of the area to get better, to become more independent, to become more vocal.
Yeah. No, connecting with some good NGOs, some good groups that are doing good work, that can be challenging to figure out, right? Because there's a lot of people wanting money. But once you get to know the groups, now we have had international students. I've had a lot of students from Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, but international students at Dominguez are a special group. And the only ones I've had in the recent years are Japan and Egypt. But we do have them come here. So getting to know some of the international students that come to Dominguez, building relationships, makes a big difference. Okay, let's see. Yeah, American University has a strong presence. We've talked about that already. Oh, government corruption. I don't know if I do. I
need
am
like 6 hours, 10 hours to talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's another
surface of
course.
it.
No, because I'll tell my students they have the option of looking at one of my books that introduces the Ombudsman's independent investigation, holding government accountable. If they want to learn more about that, they can look at that book, and then I'll recommend one of your courses or my courses on ethics, right, and leadership. Let's not get into it. But Lebanese artists and voices, do you have any favorites?
I do
The ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, Gibran is one of them. Fayrouz is one. I love Fayrouz's voice. And Sabah was more of a happy singer.
Yeah.
But she only sang about Lebanon, so I love her presence too. And then we have Majida Rumi. We have a lot.
Yeah,
We
you do.
really have a lot of people who are amazing
Well, see, that
ambassadors of art. And
that's how I see the Middle East. When I was asked to do this course, I'm like, oh, this has to happen. This course has to happen because it's a mecca of art,
yeah,
of incredible voices and
it is.
beauty and all of this.
It is. It is.
Yes.
And Egypt, long ago, they had a great movie industry.
Oh, really? I didn't
my
know.
God, the Egyptian movies was
Wow.
a big
Up there with
industry.
Bollywood and Hollywood?
No, they were the Hollywood of the area.
Wow.
Nobody called them that,
Well,
but they were the Hollywood of the area.
Bollywood is India's film industry, which is major.
Bollywood is new.
Oh, well, you mean this is really old, ancient film? Oh, that's good to know. That's worth looking into. I'm including Egypt in this course, even if
The movie industry in Egypt was huge. Even the Lebanese actors would go to Egypt. The Lebanese singer would want to go to Egypt. It's like where everybody here wants to come to Hollywood. Everybody there wanted to go to Egypt.
So Egypt was like the Hollywood.
Yeah.
Everyone would go, and music is something that
Everybody wanted to be discovered by an Egyptian director or an Egyptian agent. Or
well, I'm not a film professor. I apologize. I didn't know, but I'm sure I have students who will want to look into that.
Yeah.
We have covered a lot of topics. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you think it's important for students just becoming, familiar for the first time with Middle Eastern cultures and art? See, we say culture.
Yeah.
There really is no Middle Eastern culture unless you talk about producing all this artistic beauty
and food. The Middle Eastern
the food, yes.
cuisine is.
Oh my God.
And it's a contentious subject there. Like they argue who started hummus? Is it Lebanon, Syria, Turkey? Like it is. They have
seriously
the cuisine, the food in this area is of extreme importance.
Yes, Cyprus, where I got to enjoy Turkish as well as Greek, easily put on 10 pounds in a month, and no problem at all, because not only is the food delicious, but everybody welcomes you and gets to know you by offering you the most delicious food. And then in the West Bank, the produce, it's the freshest of food because people are bringing it farm to table.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Oh, and my husband, the desserts, he fell in love with some of the desserts. Everywhere we would go, he had to find this dessert because it was so good, right? Yeah. So, yes. The Lebanese American Hollywood star who's doing this popular TV series on food, Breaking Bread.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, who knew that he was even Lebanese American?
Yeah.
That's interesting for students to wonder, okay, who do I know who eats this food, who can tell me more, right? But he is doing this show, traveling around breaking bread with people, and that reminds me of Paris, right?
Yeah.
Because I easily put on 10 pounds in a week in Paris.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, for example, one of the cultural shock I had when we moved from Lebanon to Canada.
Oh, Canada's food.
It was food.
Well, and weather.
Right?
I have to say weather.
Weather, yeah, we needed some time to get used to it in Canada. But when we moved, the supervisor there said, oh, I know a great fast food Lebanese restaurant.
Fast food?
So my husband and I were looking at each other. What does it mean to have fast
food
Lebanese restaurant? Like,
no, you have like 20 dishes
and 2 hours.
A meal,
like,
right?
You can't have a meal for less than 2 hours.
Fast.
What is fast? So yeah, it's rooted in food and
well,
food.
And Canada has a strong British. They do have a French influence. I'm aware.
Yeah,
right. I love Montreal. I love the French-speaking part of Canada, but it's very British. And I have to say, sorry, Great Britain, but of all the places I visited. where I don't want to eat their food. That is one of the top of the list. Now, it was my students and I have, when we do in-person on-campus classes, we've done multicultural potlucks because we're very diverse, right? But I bring Norwegian cuisine. I bring some smoked salmon because you have salmon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh, wow.
And then some of the berries, some of the cheese. And they look at me, most students, because they're more used to what you're describing as cuisine, right? Yeah. Like, you know, all these dishes. And Norwegians are just so sparse. They're so health conscious and they're practical, you know, a lot of salmon, just like Alaska.
Because it's available.
Yeah, and it's very healthy and it is tasty, but when you have it for both breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's a bit much. But yeah, you are describing what I see as really enjoying food. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, so that's part of it. And they are peaceful people. Like, though they lived through violence, they lived through war, they are people who enjoy to live.
That's, well, you know, the Greeks are famous for that, right?
Right.
Yes.
And in Lebanon, if you ask people, how is Lebanon doing? They say it depends on which social media you look at. Because if you look at Twitter, it's bad. It's really bad. If you look at Instagram, Lebanon is all the nightlife and people posting their movies. So despite all the hardship in this area, people are trying to do the best they can and live.
Well, the Lebanese I have known, now one was very stern and stoic, I have to say. But the others I have known, just, I would say joy of living is a good description. Love of family, devotion to family, right? Yes. And you don't have family without the food. It's just not how you live, right? Now, Garbus, who I mentioned, the Armenian who grew up in Lebanon, he could pass as Turkish. He would regularly, you're saying they're peaceful, he would regularly visit Turkey because he wanted to understand how his people had been treated so badly during the Ottoman Empire. Yes. So he did it with the kindness of his heart. It was really, he is no longer with us. He just had that sweet presence, right? And joy of living. He and his wife, they all did. One of my Lebanese students had, I don't know how many children. He was just having children every year or so. Oh, wow. But such a gracious, generous man. I still have gifts that he gave me as a student, right? They do this ranking, the happiness index. You know, Bhutan has said it's measuring happiness instead of its economic growth. I just don't buy that the Danish or the Finnish are the happiest people in the world, because I grew up with Scandinavians and I love their sense of humor. I love how they live life. I do. I love winter. I love the sports and all. But the joy of living that you see when I was in Cyprus, and they have, you know, it's now the Turkish army occupies, it's a divided island. But yeah, I saw that joy of living there when I was there. And even the West Bank, we were welcomed continually. We were the guest of people. Yeah, so nice. Joy of living. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes.